So this is like a quick emergency video from us at O'Colly Sports. I'm joined by Adam Engel, Braden Bush, Daniel Allen, Ben Hutchens, and Sam Hutchens. We got quite a few people in here today with us. We're gonna go over what's happening right now in the transfer portal. Kind of start us off, Adam. I know you've been looking into it just a little bit further than some of us.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So you guys saw the news today where a few receivers joined the portal. Stephon Johnson Jr., John Paul Richardson as well. Really, the entire wide receiver core, the room is decimated. I was doing some research, kind of adding up some numbers. So there's only 4 wide receivers who caught a pass that are going to be, or at least haven't entered the portal or will graduate. It's not to say that they aren't guaranteed to come back or not. We don't know because with the way things are, people could say, "Oh, I come back," but then they go to the portal. So 4 guys who have caught a pass will not be in the portal or will not graduate. Brennan Presley, Jaden Bray, Taylon Shetron, and Cade Cabanis. No, Kale Cabanis.
Yeah,
Kale Cabanis. And so that leaves really. I'm doing that leaves only a few guys. I mean, Shetron and then a bunch of walk-ons. So really, it's time for them to go to the portal themselves, or also get. I mean, they only have one high schooler, Cameron Hurd from Texas, a scholarship guy who's supposed to come in. Not to say that they might add some walk-ons later on, but in terms of scholarship, he's the only guy. They have 2 wide receivers that are uncommitted transfer portal guys. Or that are committed. Deson Stribling is coming to Oklahoma State. He's from Washington State. And then there are 2 guys that are in the portal offered but uncommitted. Tyrone Broden of Bowling Green and Isaac Tesla. I'm not sure how to correctly pronounce it, of Division II Hillsdale College.
Yeah, Adam, decimated is a good word. I was, looking at some numbers myself, and the Cowboys have lost 67% of their production in terms of receiving yards from last season. 74%, an even higher number of touchdown percentages lost. So, yeah, decimated is a good word. John Paul Richardson, Stephon Johnson Jr., Braylon Presley, Langston Anderson, Bryson Green all entered the portal. That's where a lot of that comes from. Braden Johnson didn't enter the portal, but he's out of eligibility. So that accounts for a lot of that lost production. Brendan Presley, he's of course the lone guy who's done a lot, especially this last season, and is still on the roster. But behind Brendan Presley, Rashad Owens, who only had 84 yards of receiving on the 2022 season, is left. So certainly going to need to bring in some players to replace all that lost production.
Sure, and it's crazy because Rashad Owens, this season, he moved to Cowboy back. It'll be interesting to see if the coaches will move him back to wide receiver or keep him at Cowboy back.
Braden, No, you go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to jump in there before you continue on, Davis. The person that jumps out to me in terms of next year, which is obviously what we're kind of talking about with all this, is Jaden Bray, because I assume he'll be like Brendan Presley's your leading receiver, but he's best in the slot. Jaden Bray, he looked good this season. He was also hurt a lot of this season. So, I mean, just with the rundown of guys that OSU has coming back, I look at Jaden Bray as kind of maybe the make or break guy next year, unless the guy from Washington State ends up being the next Tate Martin or something. But in terms of people that OSU knows what they have from exactly, I think Jaden Bray's going to be huge next year in terms of the wide receiving core not taking a massive step back.
I think the guy from Washington State, Stribling, I think he has a real chance to be the next Tay Martin, the next guy who comes in and adds a piece to the offense that wasn't right there. His 2022 stats at Washington State, 5 touchdowns, 51 receptions, 602 yards. Washington State's not bad at offense. I mean they're pretty mid-tier when it comes to Power 5 offenses. So I think he's going to come in and fill a role, because now that we've seen 3 wide receivers into the portal in the past day, I think he has a starting job almost solidified. Braden, Daniel, y'all got anything?
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of what you guys were saying about the Washington State guy, I think to kind of paint a picture, the main story heading into this season was, what's Oklahoma, not necessarily what's OSU going to do at wide receiver, but just how deep and talented the wide receiver room. They had a lot of experienced guys because of, how much time the young guys got in 2021. But obviously, you see a good amount of those enter the portal today. And I like you guys were saying about Stradling. I really think OSU's getting a big piece there. He was a go-to guy for Washington State, big playmaking ability. He's fast. OSU, it's not like OSU was getting an under the radar guy. He had interest from Texas. I know he had interest from Washington, USC, and he's big 6'3" body, 205 pounds, and he's obviously got a good one-on-one target playmaking ability, can go up in high point balls. And then, like you guys were saying, Jaden Bray looked good, but as Sam was saying, he's injured for most of the season. Saw what he could do in most of the portions of the 2021 season. It's going to give another guy like Talon Shetron, who Casey Dunn said heading into this season he was really excited about, but he's young, he's got to grow. And obviously with the mass exodus, it's going to give a guy like that an opportunity. So.
Yeah, one guy I look at, Sam mentioned Jaden Bray hurt a lot, maybe forget, how good he can be. Well, Blaine Green, he's a guy that, you don't want to forget about from a perspective of fulfilling some of that, lost ability at wideout. Blaine had a decent first year, before being hurt all of this year, had 314 yards on 21 receptions in the 2021 season. How he'll do without his twin, I don't know. I don't know if it matters. Certainly will be interesting to see just one Green twin on the Cowboy roster now. But yeah, Blaine Green, Jaden Bray are some of the in-house guys who have been injured, but are definitely going to be expected to kind of step up into this role next season.
Yeah, and it's funny because Blaine Green is kind of the same deal as some of the other guys. He same deal as Rashad Owens. He moved to Cowboy back full time this season, so it's interesting to see if are you going to keep him there or are you going to bring him back? But Davis, going back to what you said about Tay Martin, Tay Martin. The last time OSU had a transfer from Washington State, it was Tay Martin. So those Cougars have worked out well for Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of want to go back to the guys that are exiting the portal. I think Bryson Green's the biggest loss out of those three that have entered the past day. I mean, if you really think about it, this year was his freshman year. He was injured all last season, and he kind of showed out. I mean, besides Brendan Presley, he was probably the best wide receiver. So I think that's the biggest loss for OSU. I think he was primed to have a breakout season next year. But I don't know about you guys, but I think that's the biggest loss recently for OSU.
Davis, I'm gonna have to agree with you. OSU likes in those red zone scenarios. They like to throw the ball up to their playmakers, those big guys, and Bryson also has he's sneaky quick too. I mean, I think we saw that, and especially down the latter stretch of the season. I mean, and losing a guy like that. I mean, J.P. Richardson also played slot in high school, and obviously Brennan's in the slot. But I mean, a guy like that, he's replaceable. Bryson Green's hard to come by, especially with how young in his career he was and how much promise he showed towards the latter part of the season, especially. And I mean, it's going to be hard to find a guy like that. But like we were saying, I think the Stradling kid from Washington State, he's, like you said, 6'3", 205 pounds. I think he has a chance, but a guy like Green, it's hard to replace.
And Daniel, if I could throw out another contender for biggest loss, I don't think necessarily in terms of what they did this year, but potentially in the future, I think Stephon Johnson was a guy that a lot of people had circled as a receiver of the future, a kid that would really develop into his role. His stats, if you look at his stats, he played 10 games this year, 17 receptions, 293 yards. He didn't have a whole lot of volume, but I mean, I think back to the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, his 84-yard touchdown play was just kind of a showed a flash of what he can do, maybe with more volume. And I had him pinned down as one of the guys that could potentially step into that role with a lot of players vacating the wide receiver room, and yet he's another guy to go. So I think there are big losses in terms of what the offense will look like directly next year. I assume JPR would have been a huge guy on third down and all that, but also in 2 or 3 years down the road, when you have a guy like Stephon Johnson, presumably really stepping into a role, when maybe Rangel or someone is a senior, now they're gone. So you're really gutting kind of multiple years of this wide receiver room.
Yeah. Braden, you've been a little quiet.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with Sam. That was my first thought. I thought Stephon Johnson Jr. Was the biggest loss, just because I thought his potential coming out as a freshman this season. But probably what's most concerning to me is the variety of guys that they lost in that wide receiver room. I mean, you got young guys like Johnson and even Braylon Presley, guys in the future. But then you kind of lose some program guys that are kind of proven in Bryson Green and JPR. So I mean, it's kind of a mix. It's not like you lost the young guys. I mean, you kind of lost slot guys, young guys, older guys on the outside and edge, and that's one thing OSU's never really had to worry about is coming into every year, that's kind of one position group that you feel solid about. OSU's deep, a lot of people around here like to claim it kind of wide receiver, always kind of producing, getting the next guy in, and you look at it and there's really not a whole lot left, kind of like Ben talked about the production they lost. And so I know you talk about dribbling and stuff, but I think it's more important than ever that they bring in guys like that, like a Tay Martin, because you look at it and I mean, they've kind of lost the current offense and the offense coming up. So
yeah,
they're kind of in a tough spot.
I'm going to piggyback off that and say, I mean, the last 2 seasons we've seen the wide receiver room decimated with injuries. I mean, both years. They can't afford that this year. This upcoming season, they can't afford that because they have no depth now. They just lost, four guys to the portal, and they lost 2 or 3 to graduation. They don't have the depth anymore to call up guys from the freshman ranks. I mean, we saw Stephon Johnson step up, and I think a lot of people would agree with me that we thought the Shetron brother, the 4-star, we thought he would be the guy who filled in that role. Instead, it was Johnson. I mean, I don't know. I just think OSU can't afford to have that anymore. They kind of got lucky with all the depth that they've built up, but they can't afford that anymore.
I think over the past couple of years, OSU's. I know we're not talking about quarterback, but quarterback also kind of coincides with this receiving this injury at the receiver room that OSU's had the past couple of years. OSU's been lucky with before last year who they played whenever they were decimated with injuries. 2020 it was West Virginia, a Tulsa team that was still trying to find itself. 21, that was early on the season. Missouri State, Tulsa, Boise State that didn't end up being as good as everybody thought they were. This year, when injuries kind of hit, it was as OSU was getting into the heart and soul of its schedule. And you saw whenever OSU, is, like I said, in the heart and soul of its schedule, and it's starting to face these injuries at an important position like wide receiver, it's going to show. And obviously the offensive production dipped, and OSU can't afford that next year.
I look back to an article that I wrote at the start of this season about Braden Presley and the Cowboys potentially having to lead their offensive passing attack from the slot. I talked with Josh Stewart, who and obviously this article didn't really come to pass this year, but next year I look at the options and I see Braden Presley as a huge piece, especially because you can't necessarily bank on transfers coming in. It's hard to bank on younger players. Josh Stewart told me at the start of this year, I think Presley has an opportunity to get past what I've done. One main thing in his game that I didn't have is speed. I had just enough to get me by, but Presley has some speed that can change the game. So Josh Stewart was the last slot receiver to lead the Cowboys in receiving yards. He did that in 2012. So what would that be? 11 years later, I think that might have to happen again just by necessity.
Well, it did happen. Brennan did lead this year. So, I mean, it did happen. I think it'll happen next year. I mean, kind of by default. You're going to throw it to Brennan more often than not now because you have no other guys. But yeah, I agree with you, Sam. It's going to happen, I think, by default. I mean, it's going to have to.
I think the area going to be most impacted is throwing touchdowns. right? OSU had 19 touchdowns to wide receivers this season. Brennan Presley only caught 2 of them. John Paul Richardson, a touchdown guy. Braden Johnson, a touchdown guy. Bryson Green, certainly a touchdown guy. So, the receiver from, that y'all have been talking about, big body, he could maybe fill some of that role. But throwing touchdowns, Brennan Presley only caught 2. And in that might be the harder part of this area to replace than the yardage necessity. Let me ask you guys this. I'll jump in on Ben real quick. Who's the fade guy? Third and goal from the 8-yard line. Who are you throwing a fade to in the end zone? Back right corner next time.
Gonna have to be Stribling next year. As of right now, at least.
I haven't watched much film on him. I haven't seen what is he a slot guy? Is he an outside guy?
He's an outside guy. Washington State, ironically enough, actually relied on him a lot in red zone opportunities. I looked it up. I don't remember the exact stat, but he caught close to 50% of their red zone touchdowns. But Washington State was also an explosive offense. Huh.
Now,
it might
Sam,
be talent.
Yeah, I was about to say that, Ben. On the roster right now, from guys that we've seen, I think it would be Shetron, but I'm not going to rule out Brendan Presley if it's like a deep red zone threat. I always think back to the Iowa State game from last season.
Sure,
he jumped over two defenders. But I don't know. Braden, you got anything, Adam?
OSU's always had that guy that can go up and locate a ball. It was Tay Martin in 21. Tylan Wallace before that. They've always kind of had a bigger receiver that could go up and locate a ball. And I don't really know where that's on the roster right now. Maybe it's Stribling, maybe it's Shetron. I really like Talon in what little we saw him. And he's kind of got that build. I think he's probably the most promising young guy that you have in the program right now. But
yeah, well, sure, I would agree with the analysis of Stribling. Like Daniel, I watched some of his highlight videos from Washington State. He's a tall, athletic guy who can kind of monster receivers, and he's really speedy too. I think that was another thing that kind of went on under the radar with him. But Jaden Bray he's that tall type of wide receiver where they didn't really have a guy like that this year. Because Jaden Bray was hurt. Even Coach Gundy talked a little bit about he had this podcast with Dave Hunziker on OSU Max where he was talking about how Jaden Bray's absence didn't give them that luxury that Jaden Bray is known for. So if he comes back at full health, he could have a really strong year. But it's a lot of what ifs right now.
Yeah, even just like today. You could have another day like this. You don't know who could get in the portal later today or tomorrow,
Yeah. Well, this is just the wide receiver core where we haven't even talked about the running back situation, quarterbacks, everything on the defensive end too. Everything. There's a lot of people in the portal right now from OSU. I don't know what it was. So there was a stat of 13 starters not returning.
16 scholarship. I think it's 14 starters. And Ben, I think you tweeted this one out. Is it 18 or 19 total?
It's 18 total.
18 total. Okay.
Yeah, I think A&M's number one with 23 in the portal, something like that. So OSU's like top 5, I think, in FBS right now. So that's interesting to see. But any more thoughts from you guys about the transfer portal situation?
We might have to make another video tomorrow at the rate of all this.
Yeah. If the numbers keep up as they've gone the last day, we might have to do another video. If there's nothing else, I think we'll cut this video off. Stay tuned at O'Colly Sports on Twitter. Follow all of us on Twitter as well. That's usually where we're sharing our news. So thanks guys for tuning, and we'll catch you guys later.